On a mountain top lived a man, and his name was Yi. And he had a long mustache. And he had a daughter, well, two daughters, but the elder daughter had died. And he was left with one daughter whose name was Chen Yang. Now, across the way, Yi's friend, he had passed away, leaving behind his son, Cho. So Yi didn't want him to be alone, and invited Cho to join his household, and he raised Cho with Chen Yang. And they played, and they picked on each other, and then they enjoyed each other, and they had great fun and became great friends. And as they grew up, Yi looked at them, and he, in his own imagination, thought, I think that Cho and Chen Yang eventually will marry. And he liked that idea and was very content. But he said nothing. And night after night, as night succeeded day, these two young people dreamt of each other and flirted with each other and were totally charmed. They wouldn't say anything during the day. Nobody knew about that. In the government city, there was a big to-do and an announcement because a secretary had died and they needed to replace him. So the word went out that they needed to find someone who was very smart and very talented. Who would that be? And they opened up the big book that would know, and they identified Cho as the person who could be called on to replace him. Go and collect Cho. So the emissary got on a boat, went down the river, and as day succeeded to night and night succeeded to day, he arrived at Yi's home and had to go up the mountain to his house. The government emissary was outside the door, waiting formally, and asked his servant to knock on the door. Thank you. The servant inside Yi's house put down his things, wiped his hands, and opened the door, and saw from his clothes that he was a government emissary. Yi, there's a man from the government outside. And Yi said, what? And came over. Come in. What can I do for you? And asked a servant to bring out tea. And he was served. And he sent the servants away. Yes. And the man from the city said that the secretary had died and we're looking for a replacement. Yes, yes. And we know that the boy staying with you, Cho, yes, yes, he's my good friend's son. Well, we need him to fulfill this post in the city. And Yi was much impressed and agreed to this. And they took out a contract, and Yi affixed his signature. And they shook each other's hands and rolled up the scroll, and they called out Cho. And Cho was like, who is this man? Yi said to Cho, this is a government emissary. And they shook hands and they bowed to each other. And why is he here? Well, you're going to work in the government, in the city. Oh, I would rather stay here and work in more government and local administration. No, I've already signed the contract. Sorry. Cho accepted this. Chen Yang had been looking through the curtains to hear this story as well. And she was very disappointed, but came out and said, well, I'll gather his things together. What? Did you know about this? Yes, I do know. I saw what happened. Congratulations. And then she ran away. So Cho gathered his things that Chen Yang had gathered together. He said goodbye to Yi and left with the government emissary. And they got on a boat, and as day succeeded to night, they pulled off to the side of the river and stayed in a house there. But Cho couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned and finally got up and looked out the window, smelling the night air and looking at the moon. And then he heard his name being called. That's my name. Yes, what? and he could see someone running along the side of the river, and it was Chen Yang. Oh, wait! And so Cho came down to meet her, and they hugged and were so happy to see each other. Now, there was one strange thing about Chen Yang. She did not have any shoes on, but that's okay. And then what Cho did is, let's go and hide you in the boat. And as day succeeded night, the emissary and Cho got back on the boat, and they went to the government city, and eventually got married there. Cho was very successful and got several promotions, and Chen Yang became pregnant, and delivered one son. And then she would look out the window sadly, thinking about her family and that she had left her family behind. Well, years passed, and she got pregnant again and had a second son, and go off and play. But she still looked out the window wistfully, thinking about her family and not having seen them. And Cho came in, I now have another promotion and have a week where we can visit wherever we want to. And he noticed that Chen Yang was crying and sad. I haven't seen my family in years. Well, let's go and visit them. Okay, yes. And so they got into a boat, went down the river, and as day succeeded night and night succeeded day, they arrived. And they had their two children, and Cho said, well, I do feel guilty. I didn't ask your father's permission to marry you, so let me go and meet him and ask him for his forgiveness alone. Yes, go on. And so Cho went up the mountain and knocked on the door, and the servants inside heard the knock, set aside her things, and opened the door. It's Cho! Yi, it's Cho! Oh, my boy, it's so good to see you! And he gave him a great big hug. And Cho was surprised. He's not mad at me at all. Oh, well, I've come to ask your forgiveness because I stole your daughter and I didn't ask your permission to marry her. Oh, no, don't be ridiculous. Chen Yang is in her room. She's sick. She's been sick for years and just stayed in bed. What? No, they can't be. Chen Yang is in the boat down by the river. No, really? So Yi sent the servant down to find out whether Chen Yang was indeed down there. And the servant went down the mountain and saw Chen Yang with her two children. Oh! And so the servant went back up. Yes, Yi, she is down there. I saw her. Everybody looked at each other and were very startled. Well, the spirits of these two Chen Yangs started to communicate. And the one that was sick in bed got up, braided her hair, put on a rich gown, buttoned it, and put on slippers, and went out to meet the Chen Yang by the river. And the two spirits reached out to each other and eventually became one. But oddly enough, wearing two gowns and two sets of slippers. Yi and Cho were shocked at this event. And Yi, all the servants were standing stunned. And Yi said to everyone, you can't tell this to anyone. This must be our secret. And I'm telling all of you right now, you have to keep this secret too.